Welcome to Civil Discourses. I am your host, Megan Warren. I'm here with Dr. Forrest Nabors. He is the author of From Oligarchy to Republicanism, The Great Task of Reconstruction. This book won the American Political Science Association Award for Best Book in 2017. So thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write your book?
Well, I'm a professor of political science, associate professor of political science, and chair of our department here at the University of Alaska Anchorage. I was a latecomer to academia. I was a high-tech executive for a while and then couldn't get rid of my love for books, so I went back to graduate school and got a doctorate in political science and then came here to Alaska and joined faculty here, and I've never looked back. I love my time in business, but I love this job more. It really is a calling. About the book, where did the inspiration come from? That would be my professor when I was an undergraduate at Claremont McKenna College. I eventually took my degree from the University of Chicago, not Claremont, but my professor there, Harry Jaffa, was a tremendous influence on me, and he had stayed with me through the years. Even when I was in business for 10 years, and even then, when I would pass through Los Angeles on business trips, I would always bundle in an extra day and go see the good professor and his wonderful wife, Mrs. Jaffa, and I would spend the day with him, and we would just talk all day until he fell asleep in his chair in the living room, but we stayed in touch like that. And my goal always was to follow in his footsteps, pick up his work where he left off, and so I wanted to find out what happened to our country after the American Civil War. His last book was A New Birth of Freedom, and it was about Abraham Lincoln and the coming of the Civil War. And I wanted to know, well, what happened to that new birth of freedom? So I began to study Reconstruction from Professor Jaffa's perspective. And my findings surprised me. I didn't expect to discover what I found. And I remember when I was in graduate school working on my dissertation and putting together all of these primary sources, and he and I talked, and I was telling him what I was finding, and he just encouraged me to keep going forward until I got it done, and all of that research that I did was very useful once I wrote this book, and so I probably did enough research for that dissertation to last me an entire career. As some of you will find out who do go to graduate school. But I love my work. I love being with students in the classroom, and I love books, and I love discovering new things. And I have to say that I also love this country, and keeping republicanism alive in America is my mission.
Very cool. So how do you think Henry Clay himself fit into this early version of American republicanism?
Yeah, a very important figure. Lincoln said that Clay was his beau ideal of a statesman. Clay I categorize among a group of early American statesmen who were devoted to natural rights republicanism. And although he was a slave owner, he was opposed in principle, in the abstract. He was opposed to slavery. And for that reason, because there are so many like Clay in the early days of the founding, I've adopted the nomenclature of slave-holding abolitionists. That's what I denominate Clay and the many like him during the founding era who were, in fact, born into slave ownership, or I like to prefer to say slave holding, because I don't believe, as Madison did not, that man has right to own property in man. But his type Clay's type was decisive in establishing republicanism in this country, and but unfortunately in the American South, his type died out in the decades leading up to the American Civil War. The sons and grandsons of that generation began to turn against those early principles and began to wholly embrace oligarchy and slavery, and really repudiated Clay's legacy. Clay lived a long time and lasted and all the way up to the Compromise of 1850. Did everything he could from the Missouri Compromise to the Compromise of 1850 to try to hold the Union together and try to do everything he could to limit the spread of slavery while at the same time conceding some demands to the emerging pro-slavery statesmen, that was a very difficult tightrope to walk, but he walked it well and ably.
I agree. So let's move a little bit into local issues. So you have been a very vocal opponent of Dunleavy's budget cuts, particularly to the UA system. And you have been kind of a ringleader against Jim Johnson's move to consolidate the 3 UA campuses.
Right.
So that reached national headlines at the brink of it. And in InsideHigherEd.com, you're quoted on your statement, "Our belief is that when we become independent institutions, our competition will be healthy and that each of us will be more responsive to the market and each concentrate on our strengths." So can you speak a little bit more about Dunleavy's budget in general and your work on countering President Johnson's plans to consolidate?
Right. On the surface, the question of higher education funding and the structure of governance and administration of your public university system seem to be unrelated, but they are not. The governor in our state, in Alaska, wanted to, I think, pressure the university to reform. And so his initial number, the amount of funds that he intended to authorize to the university system here, was a substantial cut. It was a $135 million net cut. And I think his hope was that would stimulate a whole bunch of activity on the university system side that would lead to more efficiencies. I think that was a mistake. If in fact his goal was to try to pressure the university to become more efficient, it was a mistake to do it that way, because you can't just throw a number over the fence and expect a good result. You have to have a vision of what you want from the university system, and he never really quite worked that out. And I was hopeful that he would moderate the cuts and give the university system time to reform the structure of governance and administration, which ultimately is our problem. The Constitution of the state of Alaska, like many constitutions around the country, hardwired a board of regents and a president into our state constitution. And so they put provisions in our state constitution that said the University of Alaska shall be governed by a board of regents and by a president. But at the time, in 1956, when those provisions were placed into the Alaska state constitution, the University of Alaska was less than 1,000 students on one campus in Fairbanks. Right? And likewise, in the state of California, in their 1879 constitution, their Article 9, I believe it was, that in their state constitution also hardwired a board of regents and a president for the University of California. But the University of California at that time just had a few dozen graduates. The Nevada state constitution also in theirs They hardwired a board of regents and a system chief as well, even before they had founded the University of Nevada at Reno. And what happened in all of these three states and in others is that the university system grew out of a single campus university. And that system of governance and administration, one board of regents and one president, it does not work over an entire university system. In our country, we believe in self-government. We believe, and you know this from having been my student, and when we talk about federalism, we mean that, our founders understood that you have to push the powers of government down as far as you possibly can in order to preserve self-government of the republic in all of its parts. And but when you hardwire a board of regents and a president into your constitution, and then the university system grows, how do you push those powers down? You're blocked by those constitutional provisions. And that's what we've been experiencing here in Alaska. And in fact, the state of Nevada experienced that as well. And so, beginning in the 1950s, university systems have been trying to decentralize or devolve power down to the local level. Most of these movements have been successful. And this movement here in the state of Alaska, which I do have some role in, is also underfoot here. So that's what we're really aiming for. We think that if you decentralize the university system, that the university system is going to govern itself better, both in terms of its financial performance and in producing better research and education.
Makes sense. So kind of in that similar vein, I think I've heard you mention this idea before, but how would you feel about Alaska adapting its framework to make it more similar to Texas, where oil revenue is used to subsidize higher education? And do you think that would be a better use than the permanent fund dividend that Alaskans receive every year?
Very good question. And I wish you had asked that question in the 1970s when the oil spigot was turned on in this state, because the University of Texas, for example, their endowment is $26 billion. That's billion with a B. Our endowment is $200 million with an M. That's a huge difference. And the reason for it is that the University of Texas used their oil revenues to beef up their endowment. We never did that. We depended upon annual appropriations from the state, and because of that, our endowment is paltry. And unfortunately, not only do we have a paltry endowment, but we also have a deferred maintenance bill that is 5 times the size of our endowment. It's $1 billion. So, to those who want to centralize the structure of our university system even further, which is what they're trying to do right now, look at their financial performance. Look at how that system of governance and administration has performed over the prior decades. It has given posterity a $200 million endowment and a deferred maintenance bill for our crumbling buildings that need repair that is 5 times. So they've left a paltry endowment and a hefty bill. And so it's not really believable that this same system of governance and administration is going to perform better financially in the future if we centralize the university even more. We need to go in a different direction. We need to practice good old American principles and devolve power down to the local level at the universities. Give every university their own board of trustees, their own endowment, their own foundation. Give them control over their alumni. Give them the authority to make final decisions on programs and services, and let the Board of Regents, focus on general policy and government compliance only. And then what you will see is improved management at the university systems and so on. But, the question about oil revenues, we missed the boat decades ago. We might have, the university could have had a much better endowment that we could have relied upon in difficult financial times like this. Something like our permanent fund here in the state of Alaska. Our endowment could have worked the same way, and then the dividends from that endowment would have helped supplement our budget here in the university instead of having to, beg, for some of the permanent fund dividend that's paid out to the citizens of Alaska. So I think your question is an apt one, and it really points to mistakes that were made by legislators and governors in prior decades, and most importantly in the Board of Regents and the president in prior decades. They should have argued strenuously for oil revenues, or for at least some kind of a share to beef up our endowment. They never did that, and here we are. But this opportunity may not be gone entirely, because in a few years we're probably going to turn the oil spigot back on, with the new discoveries around the state, and new opportunities to to exploit oil. When those discoveries go into production, we could see an increase in the flow of oil, and in that case, I hope that we will put ourselves in a position to have part of that go into our endowment. Not the oil, the money from the oil.
So just a little bit of a question about oil revenues. Do you think it's healthy for Alaska's economy to rely so heavily on oil revenue?
No, I don't. And to be honest with you, I think that I don't have political office right now, so I can say this, but I think oil in some way, oil has slowed our economic growth, or I should say it's definitely slowed the diversification of our economy. And the reason for it is because oil is so profitable that it biases reinvestment towards it. It biases investments in human capital as well as finance capital towards it. And what that means is, because everybody was looking to profit in some way, either through their employment or through, by developing a business for ancillary oil, services in the oil sector, the petroleum sector, or outside finance capital coming in and investing in oil production. What it has meant is that investments of human capital and finance capital that might otherwise have been directed towards entrepreneurial development and the development of other economic sectors that might help diversify the Alaska economy, we haven't made those investments. So oil is a mixed blessing, because it does provide cash surplus over the short term. The problem with it is that oil, if you're a single resource economy, you are entirely dependent upon that single resource. And diversified economies are much better, and we've never really diversified. So, as a former high-tech executive who ran with venture-backed high-tech companies, it's been frustrating to see the influence of oil in the state. And that's why, in my sort of spare time, I still try to work with Alaska entrepreneurs and help source capital for them. And my friends and I have put together a small venture capital firm that places funds in new companies and that sort of thing. And to try to break out of this cycle of oil dependency. And we see what happens when we go through a downturn in the price of oil. Everybody suffers. Ever since 2014, oil went from over $100 a barrel to $25 a barrel, and we all took it in the chin. and we've been, I think we have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country right now here in Alaska. Not good.
Not good. Okay, so to segue a little bit into national politics,
Sure.
We're still going to maintain a focus on Alaska, though. So recently, the Trump administration diverted military construction funds in Alaska to the southern border to help fund the wall. What do you think about this decision? And what do you think in general about the construction of the southern border wall?
Well, what do you think about that, Megan?
What do I think about that? I think that it is a bad allocation of our resources. I think that there are many things to work on for immigrants, particularly court systems. The immigration court system could use a lot of funding. I think that the allocation of funding could be placed in other areas.
Yeah, for me, I guess I would start with would you go about answering that question? Well, how important is the infrastructure, the military infrastructure here in Alaska that will not be funded now? And I'm not sure what those projects are, so I don't know how vital they are to national security. So I can't really speak to that. The value of border security, how would you rate the value of border security?
The value of border security is very low on my priority list right now.
So
I don't think we're having an immigration crisis, particularly.
Well, are you aware of the latest study? There's been some questions thrown on the last big study that came out about, I think it was 3 months ago, roughly, that estimated 30 million foreigners here in the country without sanction of U.S. law. That's not important?
I wouldn't say it's not important. I would just rate it lower on my priority list than other issues. I think that it's been made a very large talking point that I don't think genuinely deserves as much attention as it's getting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for me, since I was unfair and I turned the question on you, it's only fair that we turn it back around on me then. So I will offer up my thoughts on that. To me, the question of immigration is, more. I disagree with both of the left and the right on this. This shouldn't be a question. The question of immigration should not. We should not care about the economic condition of people who are coming into this country. And this is my criticism of the right. The whole premise of our country is that the real wealth that human beings carry with them is in their person, and is not the wealth that they have or have not piled up. That's their real wealth, is in their human person, because nature, being operating the way that she does, gives human talent to the highborn and the lowborn, and it's a beautiful thing. You could have a child of a desperately poor immigrant come into this country who is wonderfully talented. Give that child an education and see what they can do. And that's the promise of America, is that people can rise. Under conditions of perfect liberty, people have that opportunity to rise. And seeing that happen it's beautiful. And that is what fulfills the promise of this country. But I will say, in criticism of the left, is that I think the left is too indifferent to assimilation. And when we assess our immigration policy, we absolutely should take into account how well is our assimilation engine working. And I'm worried about our assimilation engine right now. Our schools are not, in my view, really teaching good citizenship and all the things that young citizens should know before they matriculate into maturity and become voters and jury and members of a jury and members of the armed forces and so on. I mean, the strength of a nation is in its union. And then here's where I disagree with the left. They say our strength is in our diversity. No, it's not. Our strength is in union. Union, the things, our motto is a pluribus unum, from many one. Not from one many, as Al Gore once misread the Latin in a lengthy speech. So are we creating that union? Is our assimilation creating that union grounded in the great principles of our country found in the Declaration of Independence? Is it? And not only that, but are we checking to make sure that immigrant groups who come into this country have they're coming from cultures that are assimilable, right? You could take a hypothetical and say, if there is such a culture that practices a form of religion, let's say headhunting, that admits and even requires headhunting, right? How do you assimilate those people to the principles of the Declaration of Independence that claims that all members of the human family have equally endowed with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Those things are irreconcilable. We are afraid now to judge whether or not to judge cultures from whence immigrants come. Now, we are in a fortunate situation in that most of the immigrants coming into this country are from Latin America. And I've spent a lot of time down there. I have the closest of relations, personal relations with Latin America, and particularly with Mexico. Wonderful people. Their problems have more to do with their political institutions, but they easily can, make it in this country and become part of our American family of citizens. No problem. The difficulty right now is in number. This is another important element of our assimilation machine that we have to attend to, which is the number that the assimilation engine can assimilate at once. And right now, those numbers seem awfully high. When you have 30 million foreigners living in the country without sanction of law, we have lost our ability to assimilate them. The danger is that rather than assimilating foreigners into our family of American citizens, we are instead allowing foreigners to extend the borders of their country into ours. Okay? And if that's the case, then what we're doing is balkanizing our country and destroying the foundation of unity. The power of a nation is not in its armies or in its wealth. It's in the moral character of the moral, and I mean this in the classical sense, sort of the moral attributes of a people. And so patriotism and union among the people is really important. And I'm afraid that whereas for you, it's not that important, for me, it's up close to the top of the list right now. And it really, it concerns me. On the other hand, the assimilation engine is very powerful. It's hard to know how to measure it and to know how it's doing well. And we see examples all around us of foreigners who have come here, who have assimilated really well, and have done great things for our country. And that's heartening. But what about those who have not assimilated? And what about those? How many are there? How many are there who come into this country who just see it as my own personal opportunity to take advantage of the freedom of this country to work and so on? But I hate this country, right? And when people are waving foreign flags in American cities and stopping traffic in mobs, that is concerning.
Yeah.
I don't know how you measure that, but that is a concern.
Interesting perspective. So
She doesn't agree, folks,
I don't know.
and she's afraid to debate me.
I mean, you say waving foreign flags. I mean, people
Yeah.
still wave the Confederate flags. I think that's just as much of an
course
issue
it
as
is.
waving foreign
Of course
flags.
it
But
is.
anyways,
It's in many, and it's just as, I mean, I'm against that too.
yeah. So, anyways, wrapping up. I think that we're pretty close to time now. Okay. So
She's after my immigration comment. She's done with me.
No, we have to wrap up. I wish we didn't. I wish we could talk all day, honestly. But this is a question that we're going to ask all of our guests. So,
Okay.
How do you think that we can increase bipartisan discourse in the country and mend the polarized climate that we're currently experiencing?
Very good question. I haven't much thought about remedies, but I don't think the problem is maybe as terrible as advertised, because I really do think the American people fundamentally like each other. And I really don't think that the American people themselves, are as divided as we are led to believe we are. It may be the political class and, professional, and that includes journalists. They're all on a mission to own the other side, so to speak, and to win political debates and so on. But the American people, they can have their political convictions, and they might even hold them strongly. But, when we're together and when there's a car accident and you see people getting out, they don't ask what your political affiliation is to help. And I do believe the American people are fundamentally kind and well disposed towards each other. And it is painful. I will say this much, that because our political theater is so divisive, it pains me just because the American people they are afforded fewer opportunities to actually be together and enjoy the family of citizens that we ought to. But I'm hopeful in my own view of the American people themselves, and my view of them gives me hope that we will overcome this eventually, and people will settle down. Remedies. So how do you make that happen? I guess doing events like this, more of them, and having debates. Having debates between people who fervently disagree, but who genuinely like each other, and doing it on social media, or posting it on social media. And I don't know. I mean, one time I'm too busy, so I never followed through on this. But I had this idea of starting up a movement. Maybe somebody out there can do this. Starting up on Twitter a civility movement where everybody agrees that if anyone insults or throws invective around or anything, that we just respond with, have a nice day, God bless you, whatever, and really mean it. And that, every time we can sort of win somebody over to the other side on social media, and get them at least to see that we respectfully disagree, that's a win. That's a big win for civility, even if we don't convince them. But we stubbornly adhere to not taking the bait, not hitting back, and no matter how tough the insults come, and you just hold to the argument, and you just keep explaining, this is why I believe what I believe. And then, so what we could do on Twitter is have a patch of some sort that says, I am a pledged member of the Civility Brigade. And the Civility Brigade. And I'm going to wear that patch, and we have a website that describes it. It says, our sort of code of conduct. And, we can fall off the wagon sometimes. And that happens. I love my kids, but sometimes I do get a little more frustrated than I should. And then but I make amends, I apologize, and come back. And we should do that on social media too. that may be a way, because people like other people who are civil, even though, if I lose my cool and you respond in a measured way towards me, and I see that you're making an effort to respond in a measured way, if I'm just a halfway decent person, I'm going to appreciate that. And you know what? You are going to score big points with me, because later I'm going to realize, gee, Megan, I was unfair with her. I breathed fire on her, and she just, blew me a kiss back. I mean, that's, and that I'm gonna, next time around, that's gonna change me. That's how we change each other. And it doesn't work sometimes, but I think it works a lot. And I've actually done that on Twitter when I was spending a little bit more on Twitter than I probably should have. I did that with a few people, and it did work. And and I thought, gosh, we can make the world a better place one person at a time that way. And if we start the civility brigade, somebody out there.
Hashtag civil discourse.
Yeah. Hashtag civil discourse, hashtag civility brigade. Somebody invent the patch, and let's put it out on Twitter. I'll sign up. Megan will sign up. Will you sign up too? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So you've got two sign-ups already for the civility brigade. And that may be my best idea on short notice.
It's a good idea. We like it. Henry Clay Center. I like the civility discourse. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. It was great. Great to see you, too.
And good luck in law school, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sue them all.
Well, we'll see.